Today's throwback, we're having a look at the Diamond Select Toys Marvel Select Juggernaut Special Collector's Edition action figure. Yes, go ahead, you have a question. Yes, Spot has looked at this before. This is a throwback. And your other question? Yes, this one is sealed. Let me just give you a little short story before we have a look at the figure itself. We, of course, already had a look at this figure on this channel many years ago. And I reviewed the figure. Obviously, the figure then was loose. I sold the figure. Yes, I know. Bad move, Spot. Bad move. I sold the figure, and ultimately afterwards, I regretted it, as it was one of my favorite Marvel Select figures. Why did I sell it? I sold it because I wanted to make some space. I wasn't really having him on display. All the more reason to get rid of him. And then I regretted it laterwards. And sure enough, as much as regret would set in, I went to my comic book store, and thank goodness the folks over at Diamond Select have re-released this guy. So this guy should actually now be in your stores. So if you go to your local comic book stores, this guy is now in there. So it worked out perfectly. It ultimately meant that I had to rebuy this figure, but I'm happy that he's now coming back to the collection. So that's kind of my little side story before we have a look at the figure itself. Figure itself is, well, I don't have to tell you, the figure is large. It's extremely large, this figure, and it's one of the heavier Marvel Legends or Marvel Select figures, if not one of the heaviest. The side of the box features some artwork there of the Juggernaut, and on the back, a read-up tells us that it's sculpted by Gentle Giant. The unstoppable Juggernaut is one of the most powerful men to walk the earth unhindered. Literally, when Cain Marko states that nothing stops the Juggernaut, he's not kidding. Finding a mystical ruby in a lost temple in Korea, U.S. Army soldier Cain Marko read aloud the inscription on the gem, "Whosoever touches this gem shall be granted the power of the crimson bands of Sidorak. Henceforth, who will read these words shall become forevermore a human juggernaut." Charles Xavier's half-brother became an unstoppable force soon after joining Magneto in the fight against the X-Men and anyone else that dared stand in their way. Other figures at the time of being released would have been the Deadpool as well as Cyclops, and there also is, though I've not seen him yet, or have not seen him at the time of picking this guy up initially, it was the unmasked variant as well. To check out more from the folks over at Diamond Select Toys, make sure you head over to www.diamondselect.com. Spot's going to take a break and get this guy opened up once again. Back to the fold, he's going to come. And when we come back, this throwback, we're going to have a better look at the Marvel Select Juggernaut. There's more. Anyway, guys, don't go anywhere. Now that we have the Juggernaut out of packaging, blink. Everybody blink just for 1 second. Trust me, go ahead. Blink. Okay. If you had blinked, you may have potentially missed his one accessory. His one accessory is not a TV. The Juggernaut has not bought himself a TV with the perks of working for Magneto. No, this is his display stand. No, actually, more importantly, this is his display stand. This is the diorama that goes into said display stand for displaying with the figure. Yes, it is ridiculous. You can go ahead and fold the sides like that. I guess you could, depending on which side you want to use, you could use this one back here, which is more of an explosion. Or you can use this one that has a rubble cityscape with also a crow. I choose to use this one, Pikachu, and you slide this simply into the slot of the display stand, and this is what they would constitute a worthy display stand display diorama for displaying with the Juggernaut. Yes, it is ridiculous. Everybody, I'm sure, pretty much is on the same page here. That is a ridiculous display stand. Noting the fact of the sheer amount of resources and plastic to produce such a monstrosity, I gather the fact that, well, Diamond Select probably did not want to shell out too much for additional display stands. Nothing too big, no rubble scene or anything like that. That this is ultimately what they got. or this is what they ultimately packaged him with. This is the equivalent of something really ugly you get at Christmas time. I use that analogy because Christmas time is coming up, but my mindset is I would rather you don't get me anything than get me a shirt that is going to sit in the closet and never be worn until you have to wear it because you're getting together with that family and they're going to ask, hey, what happened to that shirt that we got you for Christmas? This is unfortunately not something I would ever display with Juggernaut, and my logic towards the shirt is the same logic is towards this figure. I would not waste the resources to even produce a stand. I would just rather you not include a display stand than include this embarrassment. This is ridiculous. I should put this to the side. I'm just going to put it over there. This, however, is not an embarrassment. In fact, this is, again, a breathtaking interpretation of Juggernaut being, in figure form. It is probably one of the largest figures, maybe except for perhaps some of the larger Hulks, but it is certainly one of the largest, if not the heaviest, Marvel Select figures that we have received. Mileage certainly will vary from figure to figure what costs will be, but it certainly would argue the point that if you can get a Marvel Select Juggernaut, which I think this one for me costs about $30. If you compare this, the weight of it, and the amount of plastic that was put into producing it, it would certainly argue any other company out there that's charging for, say, the likes of a Marvel Legends, about a $25 price point. $25 for a Marvel Legends that uses the same mold versus $30 of a mold in all its entirety. Like, this is a completely different mold that's probably not going to be used for anything else other than the perhaps variant edition that's unhelmeted. But this mold is not going to be used for anything else. This is $30, or I guess with tax it was probably like $34, $35, but it was about a $35 figure. Marvel Legends, on the other hand, about that high, give or take, $25. Do I have to say anything else? $25. Let's get a better look at the figure. To do that, we're obviously going to look at his face first, which is probably a little harder to make out because it's inside the creviced area of the opening of his Juggernaut helmet. It's not certainly, well, I would say if you're going to give us a Juggernaut face, that is a perfect face. Not a calm expressioned, very sublime face with a closed mouth. No, if you're going to give us Juggernaut, you might as well have big, scary eyes and a big, sinister, crazy grin. His teeth are also slightly on the yellow side. Slightly on the yellow side. I'm not going to say it too loud because he might hear me. The coloring, though very subtle, again, on the face tone, it's actually a lot paler than that of the shoulders, which is really the only other flesh area that's visible on Juggernaut here. But it's a little paler by comparison. He also has gray gums. Again, not something I'm going to say very loudly. The helmet, I'm sure to no surprise, is not removable. If you were to remove it, what you would be basically faced with is a flat face appliance that's been pegged on the inside of the helmet. Again, all the more reason, if you want to get the variant unhelmeted version, he would be available as well. Primarily, most of the coloring of Juggernaut is in the browns, slight red hues, and of course the flesh-colored arms, which get much more tannage. It's not a word, I know, but a lot more tannage on the shoulder area and arm areas than the paler face inside. I guess the paint is not perfect. You know, if you look at some of the sides of the bands from face value look well painted, but if you tip the figure up, you can see areas of the lower areas or the inside areas of the bands have been left unpainted, which is a shame, but you're not going to really see it too much, especially if you're looking at it straight on. The hands are sculpted completely shut. They're not opened in any way whatsoever. But again, it fits for Juggernaut's profile. There's the back of the figure. I like that they've given a darker wash a little bit to the boot rather than just leaving it completely that reddish color. Normally this would be more of a red color, but it's a much darker shading to it that it almost blends more so with the brown. Even they've sculpted the underside treads, which is also a nice touch as well. But the figure does feel heavy. And I like, one other thing I also like about the figure is that they've given him a wet wash rather than having the majority of his body being a more matte paint. If you can maybe see it, if I tip it towards the light, it reflects and it has a much more wet complexion or wet surface to it, which I think makes better sense for me than having it more of a matte finish. Ways I would improve this figure, certainly from a paint standpoint, I guess maybe if they had maybe separated like the mid torso area where it was just a slight lighter color than the rest of it, so it stood out. But other than that, I don't really have many complaints really from a paint standpoint. Articulation though, despite his size and feeling like he's a bag of flour, Juggernaut has a fair bit of articulation. His head does rotate, technically all the way around, but I wouldn't gamble that. Even actually when you start moving the head, the top of the helmet hits immediately the top area of the shoulder and wants to start separating from it. And maybe actually this is a good opportunity to show you. If I can just tip it ever so slightly, you can see how kind of the facial appliance has been applied. It's unfinished, but at least you still get the indication of a cheek, you know, and eye, the chin area and stuff like that, but it's completely unfinished. The top portion of it would be, I wonder if I can actually take this completely, see, I wouldn't want to gamble that as it's been glued to the top of his head. Shoulders hinge out. Kind of looks ridiculous, like he's working out, like he's at Muscle Beach. The arms rotate all the way around. He has a rotation on the bicep area. He has a hinge in the elbow. And he doesn't have anything in the wrist section. That's completely staction. Staction basically means you can't move it. The upper torso has a ball joint. And then when it comes to his legs, you'd be surprised actually by how much posability his legs have. They can split to about, give or take about there. You've got the forward and back motion. You also have the swivel on the bicep, and it's actually to note as well, it's one of those articulations where you have to see that big, very noticeable crevice that allows the leg to move forward. Same idea, you can move the leg back, but that has to be rotated in order to accomplish that. In the meantime, the hinges are on the sides, so the legs do split out. He has a bend at the knee. He doesn't have anything in the lower leg area, but then he has a rotation in the ankle as well as a hinge up and down. If you could muster, I was going to say if you can muster proper posing options, you could almost have him, there we go, you could almost have him in a running pose. Spot's not the most pristine poser, but yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. A little side gold star to Spot there. Yeah, it's definitely a fun figure. Boy, oh boy, do I ever regret giving him away. I sold him. Spot basically sold just a whole bunch of totes that had like old DC Universe figures, Marvel Select figures, some old Spider-Man figures and stuff like that. And Juggernaut, in the process of, was actually one of the figures that was in the totes. I knew he was in there. It wasn't a case where I was looking for him later and I'm like, where did he go? Where did he go? No, I knew he was in there. I just simply thought to myself, I think it's time to part ways with Juggernaut. Well, it goes to show, parting ways with things down the road, you might start finding yourself missing them. And that's ultimately what happened here with Juggernaut. I started missing him. So universe smiled down upon me, and sure enough, I was able to find him at my local comic book store, picked him up immediately, and I must say, it feels good to have him home again. Today's throwback, we're having a look at the Marvel Select Juggernaut. Juggernaut. Finally good to have you back, buddy. Finally good to have you back. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more throwbacks heading your way as we have a look at things that we've looked at before, but Spot's deciding to look at again. As always, thanks for watching as you always do, guys. I'll see you next time.